Welcome to Herbology. You know, I really love Harry Potter, and sometimes it can be kind of envious of the classes they get to take and the things that they get to do. But one area where I am really never envious is Herbology, because we do have a lot of really magical plants. And today I'm going to show you some that you can grow at home. Today we are going to be looking at a couple of different kinds of plants, and we're going to start with carnivorous plants because they are definitely the stars of the magical plant world for us. And all the examples I have here are fairly easy to grow and really fun to watch, but there are definitely some things to keep in mind if you want to grow them. So the first thing to keep in mind is that carnivorous plants adapted to live in very nutrient-poor soil, so they get nutrients from bugs or small animals that they catch in their traps. So when you grow them at home, you need to have a growing medium, soil, or something like that that has no nutrients in it. If you have any kind of fertilizer in it, the plant will die. And so that leaves out a lot of the soils and growing mediums at hardware stores and a lot of plant stores because they have fertilizer in them. The second thing is Nevada is definitely not the natural habitat of pretty much any carnivorous plants. So you might have heard nutrient poor soil and got excited, but most carnivorous plants live where there's a lot of water, and that goes along with the nutrient poor soil. So if water's constantly going through the soil, the moss, everything like that, the nutrients don't stay in it, and that's one of the things that the carnivorous plants adapted to. These plants grow on shores, bogs, places where the soil is constantly being drained. So if you do grow them, you will probably need a little bit of special equipment. For these, I just have a very small greenhouse inside that I keep a lot of water in to keep it moist. The third thing, in some places, you can water your carnivorous plants with tap water, but not in Nevada, unless you may have well water that's ultra pure or doesn't have any kind of salt or minerals in it. But as far as tap water, that's probably not going to work. Even spring water that we would buy at the store probably has salts and minerals added to it for taste. So those can't be used. You want to look for distilled water or something of similar purity that has nothing in it to water these plants. And that is really the biggest hurdle for these guys here. There are a couple of grocery stores that do have places where you can refill distilled water. And so that's what I do, is I buy special water for my plants and then I drink the tap water. Do you use the distilled water for all plants or just the carnivorous ones? I use it just for the carnivorous ones unless I'm growing it in a pot that I don't want watermarks on. So like if I'm rooting a plant that's in, say, a nice jar or a nice pot that I like, I will use the distilled water, because otherwise we get the mineral and rings around. The last thing is, it's really important to find out where, as much as you can about the plants, where they came from if you're going to buy them. I know a lot of, especially Venus flytraps, you can find at the hardware store, but if the packaging doesn't say where the plant came from and no one can tell you, don't buy the plant, because a lot of these plants are threatened or endangered in the wild, and they are poached heavily. There isn't a place locally that you could really buy any of these plants. The closest place would be California Carnivores. They are not open right now, but they do mail. And also I put another one in there, Darwin's Atelier, which is another place that mails carnivorous plant. You do have to be really careful when you, like right now would not be a good time to order these plants, because even if they say live plants on them, I have 2 that died because the postman just put them in the mailbox and it was 100 degrees outside. So you might want to wait until fall to order anything, but California Carnivores and Darwin's Atelier are both places where you can order these plants. The first group of plants we're going to be looking at are called sundews or Drosera. And these are ones you probably have seen before. They're ones that have very sticky little segments on all of their leaves, and that's how they catch bugs. This little leaf right here is bent over in half. That's because he caught a bug. So inside there, I'm gonna see if I can turn it so you can see it. There is a little fly in there, and the whole leaf bends over to grab that fly and not let him go. And all of these little dots are very sticky. You can see it sticking to my finger as I pull away. So these plants variations are found on almost every continent. So these are very widespread. And I have two different sundews in this pot. There's the Cape sundew, which is this short little guy, and he's named that because he grows on the Cape Peninsula in South Africa. And then I also have a fork-leafed sundew, and I'm going to try to show you, this is the end of the leaf, and I'm posted in the resource sheets that I posted in the chat. If you look at those, you can see what this looks like when it unfurls. I didn't know what exactly would be blooming or what would be open when I did this class, so I did some other photos as well. And what happens is you can see two little tiny bumps there. Those are gonna unfurl and look like a hand with fingers. And each of those fingers will have these little guys. So they need to be pretty much set in water all the time. They need a moist environment. And then there's also something called a dormancy period. And a lot of plants go through this. We may not notice it because we have house plants or things like that where inside of our house, it's pretty much the same all year round. But these guys, when it starts getting darker outside, when there's not as much light, the temperate sundews, which are from a cooler climate, do have a dormancy period. So they will die back, and a lot of people think that they're dead and throw them away, but they're just going through a little bit of a dormancy period. The second one I'm going to show you is my favorite, and it is the easiest to grow. So this is called a butterwort, or a pingicula, which I realized I didn't put the whole name in the resource sheet that I showed you just because I'm so used to calling them pings. That's what they are normally called. But these guys grow all over the world, but are really prevalent in Mexico. They're called butterworts, which means little greasy one in Latin, but they are not really greasy. Their leaves are just sticky, very similar to how the Drosera has the sticky fingers that come out. These guys are sticky all over their leaves. And that's how they trap and digest bugs. And these are my favorite because they are really easy to grow and they are dead useful. I always have them near my other houseplants or near the sink, anywhere where it can stay relatively moist in the air. And they catch, if you have ever had fruit flies in your house and known how annoying those are, these guys take care of that problem really well. Now you can see, let's see if I can show you. So you can see right here, there's one little guy that he caught. And then because I don't have very many right now, I did post for you in one of those resource sheets. You can see one time I moved into a new apartment and boy, there were a lot of fruit flies. And so you could see how many they can catch and what they can do. And they are really great. They have really pretty coloring. You're not seeing the full effect here because of my phone is not catching up the colors, but the tips get really pink and then the outsides are this really nice green color and their flowers are really beautiful. So you can see those again. This one you can see just had a flower that died. I was really hoping it would stick around until I could show you. But if you look at the butterwort pictures that I posted in the chat, you can see what that flower looks like. They do not need to be in water all the time, but you can see, here's some babies, and these are all from the same plant. If a leaf ever falls off, it just makes a new plant wherever it falls. So that's another really nice thing about these. They're very easy to propagate. And you can see they're not even growing in soil. They're just growing in kind of rocks. That's because they're used to living on rocky hillsides on the seashore, so they don't necessarily need to be in water, but it does need to be a little moist for them, and they just sit on the top. You can see their roots there. They just kind of sit on the top. So they're pretty delicate, but if you leave them alone, they do really, really well. And then you could also, they grow by leaves, but you can also divide them. I just want to show you this guy right here. You can see that there's 2 different rosettes there on this plant. And I could probably, if I had more of this growing medium and another pot, I could pull those guys apart and it would make 2 more plants. This next one, I'm not even going to take him out of the water because he lives in the water. And he does not look like much. This is called bladderwort as opposed to butterwort. And the official name is Utricularia. But bladderworts are the largest genus and most widespread carnivorous plants. And again, you can't tell by looking at them, but bladderworts are some of the most evolved plants in the world. And what they do is they have tiny bladders. You won't be able to see them, but I just want to show you where a lot of the plant is underwater here. And they have, oh, I should do it this way more like, there we go. On the bottom of the plant, they have tiny little bladders, and they're just spread out under the water, and they sense when small bugs in the water float by, and their little bladders suck the water in and pull in the plants. So they're really active eaters and really just amazing plants, and it's too bad that it's so small you can't really see it. Bladderworts also have wonderful flowers. This one is not the variety, a different variety, but I did have one that was called an angry bunny is the name, and you can see the flower in the chat that I posted under the bladderworts. You can see what that flower looks like, and it is named very well. This one is one you're all going to recognize. This is the Venus flytrap. And unlike others that are found all over the world, like the Drosera, these are only found in one place, and they are American, which a lot of people don't know. They only grow right at the border of North and South Carolina. They are one that is threatened in the wild, so to be really careful when you are buying these to make sure that you get them from someone who has not taken them. These are not the hardest plants to grow, but they're also not the easiest. And a lot of people may have had them when they were a kid, saw them in the grocery store and thought they were really cool and brought one home and thought that it died instantly. So if you want to grow Venus flytraps, there are a couple of things that you need to remember. Again, just like the Drosera, these have a dormancy period. So if you get one home and it all dies back, you can see this one this is the growth from last year, still on it a little bit. They do die completely back in the wintertime. And so I keep mine in the crisper drawer of the refrigerator during its dormancy period because it needs to be pretty dark and very cool, but not cold enough. We can't keep them outside here for their dormancy period. Unfortunately, it's too cold. 2 is closing and opening. The word is called thigmonasty, which is the best word in the world. But just like the Drosera that actively closes over its prey and the bladderwort, these guys, their traps open and close. But that opening and closing is very, very resource intensive for the plant. If you constantly open and close them, because that looks really cool, you are going to kill the plant. Venus flytraps need to eat live prey. I know when I took my first one home when I was younger, it was kind of thought that you could feed them hamburger or something like that to keep them going, but that is not the case. They do have to have live prey. And the reason is that I think you can see in this one, just barely there on the inside, there are 3 little hairs, and you can definitely see that in the picture, one of the pictures that I have shown in the chat, if you want to open that too. But there, on each side, there are these 3 little hairs that have to be triggered for the trap to close. Now I'm going to see here if we can do this. So this is a mealworm. This is something that they can eat. And there you go. So you have to have something live that trips the trap and also something that keeps moving so the trap keeps closing. It doesn't want to waste its energy on something that it's not really going to eat. So it does have to, whatever's in there needs to keep moving so that the trap closes tighter. Do you need to have flies to have carnivorous plant? I never run out of fruit flies. I feel like every time I bring home anything from the grocery store, I have fruit flies. So that is not usually a problem. And you can buy, like I just fed the Venus flytrap mealworms, and I also give them to this guy, this tropical pitcher as well. You can also buy specialized fertilizer just for carnivorous plants. And some people can use fish food on the leaves. I have not tried that, but that's something that you might see. Yes, you absolutely can feed the bugs plants from outside. It's just that most of the time in Nevada, outside is not conducive for any of these plants. How long does it take to digest? They sort of stay, and then the trap just kind of dies. Like this one here has a mealworm in it, and you can kind of see it's bubbled up right there where it is. So it does take quite a long time. It kind of depends on the heat and the how the plants are being kept. So if it's cold or the plant isn't as healthy as it should be, it can take longer. But you can see now where this trap here has completely closed over. And so I'm going to say it'll stay in there weeks. And it does release digestive juices are right there in that trap now. So that's what's happening there. It's a little gross. And the last thing that I wanted to say about Venus flytraps is they also have very pretty flowers. We don't really see the flowers that often, but I did post a picture of that in the chat if you want to see it. They do have really pretty flowers, and the stalk is amazing. Did you have a question?
Is it gonna bite your finger if you put it in?
It would bite your finger, but you don't want to do that because then the trap has wasted some energy, and that's not so good for the plant. But yes, it will grab your finger, but then it'll probably let go again because you're too big. The last one we're going to look at is called the pitcher plants, and you might have seen these as well. This is a variety of an American pitcher plant. There are two kinds. There's American pitcher plants and tropical pitcher plants. These also have really beautiful, these are the leaves. These are what's called the leaves, but they also have really pretty flowers. All these plants have really pretty flowers, but they're never the star of the show. So again, I've posted some pictures of the flowers of these plants in the chat. And like the other carnivorous plants, all of these, the sticky stuff that they have either on their leaves or inside the traps, there's a sticky, sweet smelling nectar that draws the bugs in, and then they fall into the trap when it lands. And the plants also have a pool of juice in the bottom, a digestive juice, but it also smells really good to the bugs. So that digests everything that falls in, and we'll be able to see that a little bit better on the tropical pitcher plants. Some American pitchers are upright. They go straight up into the air, and there are some pictures of those varieties in the chat. In some places, they'll grow in a more flat out way like these do. All right, and then I'm going to show you these tropical pitcher plants. Then you can see this trap here, and inside, let's see if we can see inside. You can't really see, but there is a pool of juice in the bottom, and I'll cut off one of the, as the traps get older, they dry up like this one. So you can see it's dried on the top, but it does still have in it some of the juice and little bits of bugs that fell in that guy. So that's how they trap. The bugs come up to the top, there's nectar all around the top of it, and then they get stuck, and then they fall right in there. So I'm going to show you this a little bit closer. This guy. So you can see here that each of these traps is the end of an actual leaf. So the leaf grows, and then this trap grows on the bottom of it. And right now, this is sort of an intermediary trap. It hasn't opened yet, but you can see here, this is one that's just a baby. So that will develop into a trap at the end of this leaf. And then once it gets bigger, it will open like this trap does. So it does take a little time for them to develop. And then you can just cut them off the end of the leaf once they are done. Tropical pitcher plants are easy to care for if they have a couple of the right conditions. They do not need to always be in water, but they do always need to be wet. This one that I have, the whole plant is very big, and it's started to make new plants down here. That's what all of these little guys are. The ones on the top is an older part of the same plant. And you can see that even though it's a big plant, it's in a very small pot. It does not need a lot of soil, but that soil does need to be moist all the time. They are easier to grow. I would say they are probably the second easiest to grow after the butterworts. And they are really fun to watch. And they are this particular species is pretty easy to get to pitcher as well. Some of them, they have to be in exactly the right climate and conditions to make pitchers. But once you have one that is pitchering, if you just leave it alone, it's going to go crazy. So that's a really good one. So these are some of the magical plants, but we know that it doesn't have to be magical. Houseplants can do some pretty amazing things too. And a lot of people in Nevada, I've noticed, think that they don't have a green thumb, but that's because most of the plants people think of as houseplants are actually tropical plants. They're not desert plants. So my favorite plant, like caladium, grows in my daughter's yard in South Carolina as a weed. Norfolk pine, the trees that we think of as live Christmas trees that are sold in the grocery store around Christmas time, grow 100 feet tall in Portland, Oregon, but shrivel up instantly in our desert climate. So even our common houseplants grow wild in Southern California and Mexico. So you can see why having them in the heat and the air conditioning, and maybe both in the same week sometimes, would not be conducive to most common houseplants. But the key is knowing where and how the plants thrive and trying to mimic these conditions as closely as possible. So this means you should ideally know as much as possible about the plant before buying it, so you can know that you can give it a good home. Propagating plants, just very quickly, I'm going to go over propagating some plants. And this is a really good trend right now, which I love seeing. And many plants are really easy to propagate. One that you can start off with really easily is herbs. They're really handy. If you ever buy them in the clamshell at the grocery store, you might have used them, but then you didn't use them all the time and you threw them away. Almost all of those that are sold can be rooted and made into a plant. So like this is some basil that I got. It's just been sitting in water. Now it has roots and I can plant that plant. So these are really easy. And I'm just going to show you quickly too, one really common house plant. This is Robert, and I've had Robert for about 20 years. And you are going to need to, if you have a plant like this, like a pothos, you are going to need to cut off more than just one leaf. You don't need a ton of the plant, but one leaf will root, but it won't make a new plant. And ideally, you would like to have some of these where it's already trying to root these nodules. And all you have to do is cut the plant where you'd like, how long you'd like it to be sticking out. And then you can just put it in water. And you don't need any kind of special anything to do this. I like to use glass, but you can use any watertight anything. I like to use glass because you can see when the roots are forming. You can see if there are any potential problems. You can see when you need to change it. Some plants you can leave in the same water for a very long time. Some of them, like basil, take up water very, very quickly. So you need to water those quite a lot. So I have just this piece, and I just cut it off at an angle. It's ready to go in water. And I'm just going to show you very quickly another piece. There are Robert babies all over the country because I've had them so long and I've given them to so many people. But this is probably a month in the water. So you can see all those roots have started to grow off just this piece of plant. And that is probably ready to plant. So thank you, everyone. It was so wonderful to see you. I had such a good time. I hope you did too. And I will probably see a lot of you at noon in Wandlore. So have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you. We had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.